This is Van Electric Ghost. We're live on the air with Amy L Bernstein, and you're a writer. You have many different types of genres. You've got an award-winning novel, The Nighthawkers, Dreams of Song Times, and Fran, the second time around. But we're going to be talking about your book, Wrangling the Doubt Monster, Fighting Fears and Finding Inspiration. And I'd just like to welcome you to the Family Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me here.
Well, it's fun to talk to people from around the world. We've been interviewing people on our podcast since 2016. We're at episode like 1,185. We've been around for a bit,
Wow.
and
Congratulations.
thank you. And we love to talk to creators. And so we look at as creative people, like in all walks of life, people who take their dreams and they turn it into actionable things. Whether they're the arts or services or whatever they
Right.
do, they take what they want, their vision, and they execute on it. And what I like to talk to you about tonight is like finding the courage to make your art and overcome
Mm-hmm.
doubt, which I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people will hit that wall. And it's like a permission structure. They don't feel they have the permission to kind of execute.
That is absolutely true. Doubt and self-doubt is a complex set of emotions that really can hold us back from making decisions and plans and taking the kinds of creative risks that actually are going to do us a favor in the end. And sometimes we don't even realize how much we're stopping ourselves from kind of stepping into who we really want to be.
What made you feel like you had the permission to write? Because I run into a lot of creative people,
Hmm.
sometimes young people, and they say, "Well, there's no way I'm going to be Bob Dylan. There's no way I'm going to be Joni Mitchell. So I'm not even going to pick up the guitar." And my whole point is like, you don't remember the punk aesthetic? There's like, you could be like a Joey Ramone. You could be Joe Strummer. You could be somebody like David Bowie, who was like a more of a theater guy, right?
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
you have a voice, and your voice is actually your secret sauce. That's
Hmm.
like there's already somebody else. It's like what you have is you.
You're right. You're right on so many different levels. Couple different points. First of all, comparisonitis is a real plague in our culture, isn't it? It's so unfair to yourself as a creative person to hold yourself up to somebody who is held up to us as at the pinnacle of success. And that's not a fair or valid comparison. First of all, every artist is an individual artist. Only you are you. Only you can make what you make, and you owe that to yourself and to the world, just on its own merit. So it's not about you versus someone else. It's just about you being the most fulfilled person that you can be, practicing your art in your way. And our culture holds up these people to us who have achieved this extraordinary amount of success. The truth is, they're a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of all of us who are out here making really interesting art or just being really creative in interesting ways. And fame is not the measure of that. So we really need to set that aside.
Yeah, because like I'm a big fan of William Blake, right? And William Blake was
Hmm.
not known in his time. They found the plates in the barn.
It's true for so many. That's true for so many artists. You have painters who are getting their first show in their 80s. Especially women. They just were unrecognized, underappreciated. The
Mhm.
establishment didn't give them a gold star, and that's not what it's all about. I mean, that happens, but that's not a fair measure of our merits and our value as creative people and as artists.
Yeah, and the canon, like, there's a canon. Like, and even Bob Dylan ran into the canon 'cause he became a folk canon guy. And then when he tried to go electric, it's like, oh, can't do
Right,
that.
right. Well, and Bob Dylan is in awe of Paul McCartney, and Paul McCartney is in awe of Elvis Presley. I
Yeah.
mean, and Elvis Presley was in awe of whole lot of other people that people don't always remember now. And so it's that's always a thing, and it's fine to be inspired by people that we really admire. But at
Mhm.
the end of the day, you really got to do you. That's what you got, and you got to make the most of that.
Well, I think the perfection trap, being a musician, I
Yeah.
run into a lot of musicians, and we got so many tools today. And I'm a
Hmm.
child of the 70s. And it's
Hmm.
like, in order for me to get the song, I had to learn the song. I couldn't just skip to the computer and put it on a grid and make it perfect. And there's something about the process of the happy accident,
Mhm.
which I find because I'm a software guy and I'm a musician, but the idea of the happy accident is okay, right? There a lot of great art is actually wasn't intentional, but it's because like you have to trust yourself as an artist, right? You put your 10,000 hours in. Sometimes the unintentional things you do could be better than the planned things you were going to do.
Well,
And
that's right. And so much of making art really is just experimentation. And you can't always be looking for a set outcome. You really just need to let it flow and play around and give yourself permission to try new things and to fail and experiment and go down unexplored paths. And, it's not meant to be just a goal oriented work like so much of our culture
yeah,
demands of us. Art is all about playing around and experimenting and figuring out how to express yourself.
yeah, you don't always have to get a million views on social
No,
media. And
no, you
sometimes,
don't ever have to.
yeah, well, the post that has the least amount of views can have the most effect,
Mhm,
right? In my example, I had an example where I posted like a interview.
mhm,
Didn't hardly get any views, but a Grammy award winning producer saw it and I got the interview.
mhm,
So it's really
mhm.
like the impact of what you put into the world. It
Right,
didn't have to be a Grammy awarding. It could be that that kid gets inspired to like pick up a guitar or
right.
continue practicing. That to me is I don't have to even know that that happened, but feel that it could happen. Right? They
You know,
want somebody to
yeah,
get into it. Right?
it's just like Shakespeare wrote all those ages ago, "To thine own self be true." You really just follow your path and don't worry about where it's leading or what's going to happen. You just got to be true to yourself, and you never know what will happen.
Yeah, and people want to get, they pigeonholed, like, the idea like, I was reading about genre. Like, in music, we get these A&R people, and they wanna know what genre it is, they wanna know where you're aiming it toward, and, like, what
Mhm,
if you're doing something that's cross genre?
mhm.
What if you're doing something like, before new wave, what was it? Well, progressive rock, then became new wave 'cause it cut it down to be a single. But still
Yeah,
had a lot of progressive rock aspects to it.
yeah,
It's like you have to label it. It's like if you're a writer, it's like, "Whoa,
yeah,
am I a
yeah.
nonfiction writer? Am I a
Right,
crime story
right,
writer? Am I
right,
this writer? What
right.
am I?"
Right. I'm not overly fond of labels. The industries that I work in, certainly in publishing, is very fond of labels. And I am a multi-genre, cross-genre author. I mean, I wrote a mystery thriller, which actually you didn't mention in the intro, but I wrote a mystery thriller called The Potrero Complex that really sort of it's a mystery thriller, but it's also dystopian fiction. It's
Mhm.
also speculative fiction. And I'm not going to play by somebody else's rules about these things. I'm going to be true to the story that I need to write or that I want to write and find the readers, who
Yeah,
that speaks to.
find your tribe. But well,
Yeah,
yeah, like, they
yeah.
throw it at the wall. It's like a lot of musicians, we throw it at the wall. And, you could break the canon, like the famous, guy broke the canon was like
Mhm.
Miles. He's like the bebop cool jazz king.
Right,
Then they go and create fusion, and they did the same thing to him, like they did to Dylan's. Like, well, that's like you're Judas. Yeah, you messed up. You shouldn't do that. That's not pure jazz. Like what you did at the birth of the cool. That's pure jazz. And it's like you have to go where your heart goes, and you don't
right,
care. Like as an artist, you go where what serves the story, what serves
right,
the song.
right.
Yeah, somebody could say, "Well, I hate modern digital equipment," but like, if the song requires me to use some digital piece of instrumentation, I'm not going to just sit there because all these people say you shouldn't use it. Like, if I want to use it because it serves the aspect of how I want to color the song, then I'll use it. It's like I don't need to get thrown into camps. I do whatever serves whatever I'm trying to do.
Absolutely. And whatever serves whatever you're trying to do. That really is that's the good rule of thumb to follow. Yes.
So when you were writing, like, did you have people around you that said, "Well, you should stay in nonfiction. You should stay in this type of genre," or do you just had people who were more supportive of your non-genre type of
There's
mindset?
there is nobody all up in my business to that extent. Nobody's telling me what to do. I'm telling me what to do. And that would be funny. I would say, you know what? Mind your own business. No. I mean, I've written fiction and nonfiction, and I've been all over the map. I've been a playwright, a poet, an essayist, an executive speechwriter, a journalist,
You're
a
right. You're a
novelist.
writer.
I mean, I'm a writer, right? And so it's whatever the form needs, whatever the function requires, whatever the story form the story needs to be told in. That's how I'm going to write it. So no, I don't. Again, it really has to come. Those impulses have got to come from deep within you as a creating person, and you cannot let the outside noise basically tell you what to do. It doesn't work, and you won't do your best work.
Yeah, noise is a big problem today. Like
Yes,
again, I
yes,
talk
it
about like
is.
a child of the 70s.
Yeah,
I had like 4 TV channels. I didn't have the net.
yep,
Yeah, and I couldn't skip around the records I was listening to. I probably was like
yeah.
gonna listen to side A and side B.
Mm-hmm.
And I find there's like some of the attention span that like people are like as a producer, I'm working sometimes like please turn off the cell phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Please, like if you come into the vocal booth, don't bring the cell phone in to read the lyrics, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like they have to kind of tell people certain things. It's like because they don't know, because like they have so much noise coming around and so many things distracting them. It's like they're not fully engaged, even though they might think they are. And so I'm wondering, like, have you found that a lot of these modern things distract, or you found ways to keep them from distracting you?
It's a terrible problem, and for reasons even we've already discussed. I mean, that yes, the noise, let's call it the noise. Social media, too many channels, too many ways that things are talking at us, showing flashing pictures in our faces. It's constant. I mean, I'll tell you that since the election, I've stopped. I don't read any hard news. I don't read any of the mainstream news anymore. And I was a news junkie, but I had to quiet my own mind,
Had to walk
okay,
away
so
from
that I
it.
can stay creative. And I think that people are emphasizing all the wrong things, which is they think that all that noise is what's going to validate them. And
Mm,
it's not. Your validation comes from in you. You have to feel the need to be yourself, make your own art, do things in your own way, and then you can go out and share it with the world, and the chips will fall where they may. And there will be many, many, many factors that you don't control. What you control is the making process. You control the creative process and the thought process and all that goes into that. And then that noise, everything out there, it's not real. And it's not. And people have got to learn to start to separate that, we're just gonna so it's gonna drown us.
yeah, I think it's a lot of times like rejection is hard for people,
Yes.
because
Hmm.
the thing about social media, I would wear with the kids, right?
Yeah.
My daughter was showing me this thing about like body dysmorphia, right? And then there were
Oh,
these
yes, terrible.
net people
Yeah.
the kids were watching were telling them what the perfect eyebrows are, what the
Mm,
perfect nose was.
mm,
I said, "That's super destructive," because, like,
absolutely.
there was this young man saying what the perfect image of a man should be,
Hmm.
but it was coming from his perspective, and he's putting it out there, and he's getting all these people following him. I was like, "That's the danger thing, because like, that can get a lot of
Absolutely.
views. That can get and it's like, where's the
Hmm.
independent thinking? Like, where's the
Hmm.
things like, why is he the judge of that?
Right.
What made
No,
him the person?"
you are so right, and we have given away a huge sense of our own self-worth by allowing the culture and strangers to judge us and tell us who we are, whereas we tell us who we are. And we need to help young people in particular get in touch with that inner strength that they don't even know they have. I met a whole bunch of teenage writers at a workshop at a conference recently, and it was so amazing to see how creative they are from the inside out. They're doing it their way.
Hmm.
And I think that, and it's really powerful, and you can see them really learning who they are as people, as artists, as creators, because they're doing it it's coming from inside them. It's not coming from those voices on a phone or on a TikTok or
Yeah,
whatever it is. Yeah, it's
yeah.
so
Well,
important.
it's so important to have the kinda collective kinda art
Yeah,
mindset, right?
yeah.
I was kinda talking about CBGBs, right? Mindset, or, like, you think about, like, on the Frank Zappa in the Mother's Intervention, they used to have these happenings where Andy
Mhm.
Warhol and the Velvet Underground, they had
Yep.
these happenings, right? They had
Yep.
cross genre. Andy
Yep.
Warhol, painter, hanging out with Lou Reed,
Yep.
hanging out with actors,
Yep.
hanging out with models, and doing these happenings.
Mhm.
Whereas, like, it wasn't supposed to be like popular. It was supposed to be like we want to express ourselves,
Right.
and we have a right to our expression. We need to, and we'll help each other through this collective. And I see a lot of young people in these collectives. It kind of reminds me of that. It reminds me
Yeah.
of the kind of 60s, 70s kind of
Yeah.
motif.
Well, I think there's a chance that the younger generations are going to start tuning out the external noise and tuning in more to what's inside them. I think it's starting to happen, and I hope that continues. And I think you're speaking to that trend. It's a good thing.
Yeah, because that to me is where, I see, I was telling some artists, is like, don't try to go to the club by yourself.
Hmm.
Go with like 5 other bands.
Right.
Right, and then say, like, "We're gonna take over the club tonight," and then maybe we'll take it over for the whole week, and
Hmm.
we'll bring our vision, and we're all kinda not fighting each other, we're all working together, kind of a commune hippie mindset,
Yeah.
that you
Hmm.
could go out there, hey, Asbury, like San Francisco with the Grateful Dead, and they would go out and play for 5 hours, you
Well,
know?
yeah. Well, remember too. I mean, as you well know, part of what's working against that is, especially since the pandemic, a lot of younger kids have lost uh, some of the ability to socialize comfortably with others, to be around other people, and to be around other people without devices and that kind of thing. And we got to build that back up. That muscle's got to be built up again.
Mhm.
For a whole generation and 2 generations almost. And so that's some work that we have to do, and that I hope parents can help support as well.
Yeah, because when you're trying to give people the confidence, right, to, be able to have the permission structure to
Yeah.
overcome your doubt, so you could go into art, you go into writing, you go whatever creative direction you want to go. If you don't have like the self-confidence, right? You
Hmm.
can't start if you don't love your own work. Because like
Right.
who's gonna advocate for your work if you don't love your own work?
Well, what I talk about in the book, in Wrangling the Doubt Monster, is that it's not so much that we can overcome doubt, because I don't think ultimately, if we're being really honest, we're human beings are doubtful by nature. We question everything. We question all aspects of our existence in different ways. But I think that we definitely can walk with our doubts by turning down some of the noise that you and I are talking about, turning down the external noise that's it's not real to who you are as a person, as a human being, as a creator, and really turn up the voices that remind yourself of your own capacity and your own abilities and your own raw talent and the things that you can do and have done. And so we have to kind of reset the dial, I think, is one of the things that we need to do to begin to manage doubt, to walk with doubt, and not let it be the only voice in our head. Because if you listen just to the culture out there, it's gonna win. It's gonna be win and plant those seeds of doubt every time, because you don't have the perfect eyebrows. That's
Yeah,
what they're telling you. That's
yeah,
gonna make you doubtful, right? And it's not real. And it's like, it's really is kind of like being able to tell what's a mirage and what's really in front of you.
yeah,
And you're in the desert and you think you see the water. It's not real. The desert's real.
yeah. I was remember
But but
my
that shimmery pool is not, and you need to know the difference so you can stay alive.
reminds me of my philosophy class at Bowdoin when the Camus and Sartre, they were talking about, oh, the forest, and do you hear the tree fall? What's the perception versus reality? And a lot of it is like, there's fear in safety.
Mhm.
Humans are kind of will suppress themselves for a sense of safety.
Mhm.
You'll put yourself in a toxic situation, a codependent situation, because it's what you know. And what you don't know, to be independent, that might be more scary to being codependent.
Mhm.
And so then it's easier to actually deal with pain that you experience and know than the unknown, which is like, to me, is like the unfound sound is what I'm driving for as an artist.
I
That's what I'm
absolutely
looking for.
agree. No, I agree, and I use some different words to express something very similar to what you're saying right now, which is it's about renegotiating your relationship to risk taking. I don't mean bungee jumping off a really high cliff.
Bridge.
I mean creative risk taking, like really trying something new, picking up a new art form, sharing your work for the first time, taking a different tack, changing your painting style, all the things. It could be starting a company, launching something new. You have to be able to accept that these creative risks are going to feel scary and sow a lot of seeds of doubt. You're going to wonder if you can do this. Can you pull this off? But you need to go forward as well. You can be cautious about it to some extent, but you want to go forward because you want to make those discoveries that those risks are going to open up for you, because that makes you stronger, deeper, better at all the things you're trying to do and become. So I think renegotiating our relationship to risk is a big part of how we can manage some of this fear and kind continue to move forward, even though it's in us. We have to remember, keeping eyes on the prize, as the expression goes. It's important to do that.
Well, I think it's the kind of nature when you're a child, right? And you want to learn how to ride a skateboard or a bicycle. Me and a child of the 70s, we didn't have helmets. And if
Mm-hmm.
you try to ride that twin Phantom, you're probably going to skin your knee, right? You're trying to
Mm-hmm.
ride that skateboard, you're probably going to hit the curb. I mean, it's kind of it was what happened, right? But you still wanted to do it, and you had the
Mm-hmm.
childlike kind of innocence, like why not? But you weren't so scared of what everybody's saying. Well, you
Right.
stink, right? You're
Because
terrible.
right. Because
Like,
you weren't projecting all these fake consequences. Well, because if I do this, I'll fall and I hurt myself, and therefore I'm not going to do it. And you just did it. You're right. I also think that goes hand in hand with, when we were kids, we were always innately creative. If we had relatively safe, stable upbringings, we were coloring or finger painting or making up games with friends or
mhm.
putting on little plays or doing runaround games in the neighborhood where we were chasing each other with a plot or whatever it was. We were so effortlessly creative, and then we grow up and we turn all that off because we think we're supposed to.
Yeah,
And
we did.
it
Yeah.
we're not supposed to, actually. It's we just because an activity doesn't earn you money or has a playful side to it, or it doesn't have like what's the point, it doesn't might not have a point. That's a lot of that's art. That's what
Well,
art
the art
is.
and science is like a lot of times. I mean, I worked at Fortune 500 companies. I've gone to a smaller kind of startup because what I found is the why not, why can't we do that was more evident in the startup, smaller company than the big company. Big company
Hmm.
said they wanted that.
Right.
They said they wanted the kind of person who's a creative type of person, but then they want to put them in a box. They want to put lightning in the bottle, right? But light it doesn't want to stay in the bottle.
Right.
But they wanted to. And then I found the people who are willing to say, hey, you know what? Whatever hat is necessary to get the task done. And I'm like, yeah, that's the environment I want to be in.
Right. Right.
Not the environment
Well,
to tell
yeah.
me which hat I got to wear.
Well, and then it's funny because then the company grows up, right? And then it gets cautious, and then it doesn't take so many risks, and then it says no more than it says yes. It's sort of parallel to what happens to us, right? Being from these creative children, willing to take all these risks, and then we get older and we're like, not so much. I
Yeah,
mean,
risk
and there's
averse.
there's 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 some upside to it as well. Of course, like you don't do stupid boneheaded stuff when you get older, but I mean, on the creative side, we kind of lose touch with that kind of, you know, fun and just trying stuff out for its own sake.
Yeah, I mean, because you look at things, Einstein was getting D's in math,
Right.
but he's got the better mathematical. His mind was in a place that you couldn't really measure it with that system. It's like the teacher
Right.
that was teaching him probably was failing because it didn't
Right.
keep him interested.
Right.
Just because the kids are failing the test doesn't, it could be that the teacher isn't actually failing her test
Right.
because she's not actually invigorating the young minds to actually want to be curious.
Right.
So sometimes the measures we have put labels on people, say they can't learn when they find out, oh, these kids are neurodivergent. They learn in a different way.
Different way. Right.
And I
Yep.
found a lot of neurodivergent people creatively, like super creative, but
Hmm.
hard to put in the box.
Yes.
And then people judge them, and then they get disinterested or they get pushed down. And then when you can self actualize or you get supported, they blossom. So it just seems like sometimes you have to reach out to people who will lift you up instead of red marking everything you do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, it's the culture coming for us and telling us that if we don't fit in the box, there's something wrong with us, or we're not doing it the right way, or whatever it is. And that's also antithetical to being creative. Yes, I agree with everything you said.
So the drive to put together, like when you write your work, whether it's
Hmm.
nonfiction or whatever type of writing you do, um, I would think is it has to serve whatever the way you go at it is like it serves whatever genre you're in, or it serves the
Hmm.
purpose of. So
Hmm.
how you start everything, it might not be the same pattern. You might not be able to say, "Hey, this is how you do the book."
Hmm.
It's kind of based on what you're working on, right?
Absolutely. Every book is completely different. If you're writing in a genre where there are expectations, like say mystery thriller, or I've written a romance, I've written a book for younger people, you have to meet some expectations that the reader of that kind of book is waiting to see in the book. So with a mystery thriller, well, first of all, you got to have a mystery, right? So I have a
Mhm.
missing teenager on page one. So you know right away, somebody's missing. This person has to be found. This mystery is going to have to be solved. So you have to meet those expectations. When you're writing nonfiction, you're dealing more with in the world of ideas, and you're kind of sharing with people a journey that's more about knowledge and about learning, maybe finding out something or thinking about something in a new way, or thinking about something that they hadn't thought of before, or learning something new. So you're taking them on a different kind of a journey. And every book is really different. And I will say that Wrangling the Doubt Monster is really different because it's a really short book that's both got some standard sort of little narrative essay stuff in it, but then it's got these pages that have this a short, sharp prose on it, not that much text on each page, and lots of illustrations to sort of also keep you engaged. And every page is kind of gives you a little hit, like a little dopamine hit about how to manage your doubts and how to feel good about yourself. So you can just dip in and out of this book and not have to read it cover to cover all in one sitting, which I think is kind of refreshing, actually.
Yeah, well, given the way the times are, the attention span, I've heard talk to authors and say, you used to be able to do 200,000 words, 300,000 words, now you get to 70,000 words, or you have to have illustrations, or you have to come at it in a generation of people that are on TikTok. The people
Yeah,
they're on the Instagram, they're on these reels,
yeah,
they're on these
yeah,
shorts.
yeah,
Everybody's looking for the cliff notes,
yeah,
instead of, engaging and fully diving in.
yeah.
But if you can still get the hook, as a musician, like we always like, I was looking at some musicians, so some of my songs have like 5 hooks to pull somebody and keep them there. It's not good enough to have one. You might have to have 5 to actually keep them in
Yeah,
inside the song.
yeah.
So as a writer, it's like, what are your kind of hooks from a musician point of view?
It depends on the book, right?
Mhm.
So in the book world, a lot of people say, well, every book needs a hook, and I teach a lot of courses that make that point as well. But with books, you often want to what readers want now is they want a hook on page one, because as we said, they're impatient. It used to be you could have all kinds of lengthy exposition. You could set the scene for several pages. You could talk about the greenery, go on and on and on, right? You could do
Mhm. Very
that, and
descriptive.
you wouldn't lose the reader. They'd be with you because they were used to that pacing. Now you got to lay out your hook like within the first page, certainly within the first 5 pages, or you lose them.
Mm.
So that's just become like a fact of life about the way people read and what they expect from a book. And the truth is, although I don't love that, styles of reading do change over generations. And if when you read a book from the 19th century or the 18th century, it reads very differently from
Yeah.
the way books read today. So, the hook needs to be there pretty early on. And I'm always really mindful of that whenever, with every new book I start. I'm very mindful of it. I mean, I have a novel that I've been sort of shopping around lately. And, you know, in the very first sentence, the protagonist basically is puking in the bathroom. And that happens in the first sentence. So you're either with them or you're not. But like at least the action gets going really fast.
Yeah, well, people are so like, I always talk about in terms of music as sound painting,
Hmm.
because when people get into a song, they usually visualize something that they connect with in the song, and it's
Right.
deeply personal.
Right.
So as a writer, like as a songwriter, it's like I put the song out in the world, and then the fan owns it. Even though I
Right.
might have had a vision
It's
for it,
true. Yeah.
their interpretation of my vision now suddenly is like theirs. And it's like, and so if they kind of misinterpreted, you can like, oh, well, that's not really what I meant. But if
Well,
90% of the
yeah.
people have seen it this way, I guess that's what it is.
Yeah. Well, you know, when you read reviews, you know, it works a little bit differently with music, but when you read the reviews of your own book, people are seeing things that you didn't even know were there. And so this sort of a joyful experience when they're bringing an understanding to it that you maybe is still in your own subconscious. You didn't even know you wrote that to be discovered. And look,
Mm,
when people don't like something that you write, you didn't do anything wrong necessarily. It's just not everything isn't for everybody,
yeah,
you
it
know?
doesn't vibe with everybody. There's like a vibe to everything in the universe, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
either you picked up on the muse, you pulled it in,
Yeah.
but it doesn't speak to everybody.
No.
That's
I
why
mean,
somebody might not like,
yeah. I just
nonfiction.
finished yeah, I just finished a bestseller by a very successful novelist. I'm not gonna say who or name the book, but I mean, this is typical. When I pick up a really popular novel, I often really strongly dislike it. It's just it's too on the surface, or it's just heavy-handed, or it's just
Mhm.
not interesting to me. And so, but that's a best-selling author, so hundreds of thousands of people love it. So, you know, you can't please all the people all the time. And as we said at the beginning, you really got to do these things for yourself, right?
Yeah,
You
art
have to
art's
create for
art's sake.
yourself first, and then you cannot control how people are going to respond.
It's art for art's sake. You go out there,
Absolutely.
you maybe genre bend or
Yep.
pull something, and people tell you. I was talking to one author. They said, they did children's books, and they said you can't be your own illustrator. That's the rule. And I said, well, that's kind of what I want to do. So,
It's also not true.
yeah. So it's like, but there's like people that they get caught up in somebody's paradigm, but it's like that's very narrow minded, and like you miss the biggest thing coming is not always what is always what's going on. People want to repeat the same formula because it's easy to
Yeah.
kind of just
Yeah.
clone and copy, and now we got AI and we got to deal with that. But to me, it's like it's really individual vision is what I love. I love to find stuff coming up from kind of like unforeseen places,
Right.
different
I agree.
countries, different cultures, different
Hmm.
mindsets. Like if you read something that came from a Japanese perspective,
Hmm.
pacing is different, cultural influences are
Yes.
different,
Yeah.
history is different.
Yeah.
Then you're like, wow, I didn't see it that way. And be willing to look at somebody else's point of view. And some people aren't, it's okay. Well, you're not going to get that audience.
No, I
You know,
like that too. I just finished I think it was a science fiction movie, and I think it was South Korean and not Japanese, but I think the cast was mixed, which is why it was a little confusing for me to know. But it was definitely a much slower pace
mhm.
than most
Western stuff,
American
yeah.
film. And I've noticed that before in other Japanese and Korean media when I've consumed that it's just different. The cadence is different, and it's fascinating, and I love watching that and sort of leaning into the way they do it. And you always can appreciate that. I like that.
Yeah, I always liked it because I actually lived in Japan for a couple of years, and it was kind of like, the kanji, which is like a lot of their language is actually
Yeah.
based on Chinese kanji. And then there's like
Hmm.
80 characters that are uniquely Japanese, katakana, hiragana. But the idea is like if you have a language that's symbol based, like if you look at kawa, is the idea for a river. If
Hmm.
you look at the way it looks,
Right.
when you write it, it looks like a river.
Like a river. Right. Yeah.
Pictogram looks so when you have language where there's like pictograms
Hmm.
and they represent ideas, not just the letter.
Hmm.
There's a different mindset in that language
Hmm.
when you see the language,
Hmm.
and there's a different level of meaning. So what you see is not always just obvious. There's layers of meaning that go
Hmm.
with it. There's certain levels of you've got to speak certain language to elders, certain language toward women or men,
Hmm.
and it's
Hmm.
totally different cultural rules.
Hmm.
If you come in I could give a bull in the china shop and you don't understand that, then you can make a lot of faux pas. But like, is this interesting? The culture, if you're willing to open up the culture, and I think there's this one culture
Right,
where it tends to my Western mind says, oh, there's one culture.
right.
Not that there could be many subcultures. Even within our culture, there's tons of subcultures.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
And telling
Yeah.
stories is kind of telling all the, all aspects of what out there from like a
Hmm.
different kind of perspectives, like coloring the
Hmm.
lines,
Hmm.
shades of gray.
Hmm. All true.
So when you get into publishing today, are you there's a lot of different methods,
Yes.
self-publishing,
Hmm.
people do audiobooks, they do,
Hmm.
electronic books. What's where are you on like what's going on into the different methods? If you're going to advise people, it's like, oh, I can't get to a big
Yeah.
publishing house. Does that mean I can't
Yeah.
even be a writer?
Right. So I'm a professional book coach. So I do work with a lot of other writers as my clients who I'm guiding toward their own best path to publishing. So I know all the paths, and I've also experienced them myself, most of them. And really, what it comes down to is, a writer has a lot of different choices to make about who they want to read their book, whether they're willing to invest their own money in the book itself and in the marketing, whether they what they're looking for, are they just looking to share something with family and friends, or are they looking for to compete for a prestigious prize, and are they looking for like a big name publisher like Simon and Schuster? And so there's a lot that goes into making these decisions about what path you want to pursue with your book. And
Hmm.
then there are decisions that the marketplace makes for you. I mean, uh, if the book is not particularly well written and doesn't have a really clear readership, you may need to self-publish in order for it to be published, and that's fine. If you feel satisfied with that, it's a completely fine choice. If you've written something, really polished, really powerful, it's very cinematic, and the storytelling is really clear. Well, maybe you can get an agent and then get picked up by what are called the big five, the really, really big publishers who are considered the major powerhouses, kind of left standing among the English language presses. But there are options in between as well, depending on if you want to have more control over how you get published, and what's done with your own property and all those kinds of things. So right now there's a really broad spectrum of choices, and every writer who wants to be an author can and should get somewhat self-educated on these choices and decide what really suits them best based on their own budget, on their own desires, on their goals as writers, on who they want to read their books. So there's a lot of choices to be made, and a lot of information out there to make those choices.
Well, that seems to kind of seg into who needs a book coach, because like given all those different kind of marketing or
Yeah.
audience choices or publishing choices, it seems like you need somebody to help you navigate that. And is that
Well,
where like coaching comes in?
that's one end. That's one end of it. What many book coaches do is, I mean, let's remember that writing is a very lonely business. You do it alone. But it's also one of the most difficult crafts on the planet to master. And I say that, I'm stating that as a fact, not even as an opinion. Writing well is very, very, very difficult to do.
Mhm.
And many of us need to get in those 10,000 hours of practice before we get even halfway decent at it. It's hard. And so what a book coach can do, just generally, is serve both as an accountability partner for a writer to make sure that they stay motivated, they can meet deadlines. A book coach can help a writer figure out how to structure a book. What's the real beginning, middle, and end? What's the right way to outline the book? What's really going to happen in the story? Help them figure out the point of the story, and be a champion for that writer to sort of keep working through the hard parts, which is a lot of it. It's a long, hard
Mhm.
road. And some book coaches, and I'm one of them, but some do this and some don't, help writers then find their way into the commercial marketplace to figure out how to either pitch to an agent or pitch to a publishing house, if they have a really strong book. So a book coach is that person who's kind of by your side in a professional way. It's not like getting advice from your spouse or your partner or your sister or your cousin or your mother or your aunt, they don't have a professional vocabulary for talking about your writing. A
Hmm.
book coach can speak to you very professionally about what's working, what's
What's
not
working, what's not.
working, what's the point of the book, where is it really going, how is this structured, and all these things that come into play. So
Kind of like a producer when a band comes in
yeah,
and they've got the raw songs, and it's like, well, here's the raw demo,
right,
but this is how we could rearrange it, how we
yeah,
could change the vocal,
yeah,
how we could add flourish to, we could change the key, could do a different chord, we could emphasize this here, emphasize that there. So they take your raw material and then they make it better, right? Get you be a better writer. So over time, Paul McCartney and George Martin, John Lennon, he's
yep,
like teaching
yep,
them songwriting skills,
yep.
right?
Yeah, we forget how much George Martin helped Paul and the Beatles. I mean,
Yeah, the whole
he shaped that
thing.
sound at a really seminal moment, right? Yes, and so yeah, a book coach can do a lot of that. Yes,
Yeah, it's that kind of shaping of your
yes,
vision to
yes,
the point that you start to learn, oh, this is like this is the song craft, right?
right,
This is how you get the hook, but this is how
right,
you do the outro. This is
right,
how you do the intro. This is
right.
how you do the
But
second verse.
exactly, and
How you actually piece it
right,
together so you actually have a
right,
full
right.
song, not just a hook.
Right. And to
A
be
lot of
really
times,
clear, yes, yes. And to be, that's a good analogy. And to be really clear, the book coach is never writing the book for the author. The book coach is guiding them to develop their own vision on how best to write a book, like to pull the best out of that writer. And which is
mhm.
certainly what a producer does. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're basically there, like you're a music teacher in a way.
Hmm.
You teach like this is a better way to attack this song, right? This is
Hmm.
a better way to kind of do a decrescendo here, do crescendo here, do this emphasis here, do this,
Absolutely.
have some more space between the notes.
Yep.
And this is a big idea in music. Like you could layer something crazy and keep on doing like a wall of sound, like a Phil Spector type
Phil
of thing.
Spector. Yeah.
But
Hmm.
sometimes it's at that space between the notes where you get a little more vulnerable
Hmm.
because you could hear if you're a little dissonant. You could hear if you're a little micro timing. And if you're a writer, it's like, is there the same kind of thing in writer, like the space between the
Exactly
words?
the same thing. I mean, exactly the same thing. It comes down to pacing. It comes down to, we have beats in a book, the way you'd have beats in music. I mean, the beats in a book are pacing, it's the voice, it's the amount of tension, it's sort of what you're doing with what's happening in the story at that moment. How do you give that story room to breathe? How do you give the reader room to breathe in the story? All those things come into play. Absolutely. And if you're being coached, your coach can often see some of those moments or help you as a writer to see them before you see them.
Yeah, because teach you how to put the little Easter eggs in. Like film
Yes.
directors are always throwing little
Yep.
Easter eggs, throwing something in you don't know what it means.
Hmm.
And then they play with timelines. And the
Yes.
timelines can go forward, back, in verses, like all over the place.
Yes.
People like to play with the timelines and then figure out like through throwing the Easter egg, throwing the foreshadowing,
Yes.
just doing all these ideas, throwing all this stuff out there. But doing it in a way was like, what is it too much? Is it just enough? Is it just right?
A very important question because something can be, oh, like the book I just finished was overwritten. The writer kept telling us things that the reader already knew, as if we didn't get it, and we got it. And I think the writer didn't put enough faith in the reader in a way. And so, yes, you can have one layer too many. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because the nuance is the thing. Like that's
Yeah.
the art of it. Like
Yeah.
the art of anything you get into is like it's like you can and I've talked to like fantasy writers that build these massive worlds. They
Yes.
spend all this
Hmm.
time building the world, building the
Hmm.
character design, building the plots out. So I guess
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
trilogy, and they got the trilogy all mapped out. And I'm like, okay. But it's like sometimes there's room for like the flow state. Like it could be over engineered. This is we run into music a lot of times, like because I could over engineer it and I could go to take 101. By the time I go to take 101, I kind of destroyed what the song was really about. Right.
Well,
Because
and
I could
yes,
have
and
take four, it was like
yeah.
closer to
Yeah.
my original vision.
Yeah, and I think in books, especially series with very, very, very heavy world building, you run the risk of crowding out characterization and plot and giving the reader somebody to really care about in the story because the world can get so elaborate and so built or overbuilt that it overshadows what's actually happening in the story. I think that's a common pitfall in books with big world building. Yeah.
Yeah, so then there's like it seems like the one-off book. Is that a rare thing today to have the because there's a well, I know in certain genres there's people want to have these sequels. They want to have
There's still plenty of one-off books. Not everything is a series. I mean, sure, series are very prevalent in fantasy in particular and in some categories of romance, but just to name, two genres, but no, I mean the one-off book is still very much alive and well.
that's cool. Because I mean I grew up with a lot of one-offs.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, but I know taste today, some people want it's kind of like the movies, they want to do
And we've been influenced too by the way we consume television, right? You watch a
Yeah.
series which has 6 or 8 or 10 or in the old days 12 episodes, and you're hungry for that thing to kind of continue and be spun out. So they now want this from books. They think like, well, I want, this can't be over. This show can't be over yet. I need the next season. So they
Yeah.
want the next book.
Yeah.
And of course, this works out very well for a lot of authors, particularly self-published authors who are writing well in, some real strong genres like fantasy and certain parts of and science fiction and romance and what's now called romantasy, which is romance and fantasy mixed together. It can work very well.
That's interesting. So is there any kind of like a lesson learned as a writer from your experience, like a top
Yeah.
3, maybe the top 1, top 3
Top 2.
lessons
I'll
learned?
tell you the top 2 are number 1. You need to write a lot to get good and get better at writing. You cannot expect to be a good writer out of the gate. It's very, very hard to do well in any genre. It's hard. It's difficult. So be prepared for it to be difficult and be prepared to not be great at it and accept constructive criticism from people who know what they're talking about. But number 2 is you can't go into this if you're not prepared to handle rejection. Unless you choose not to share your work with anyone, which is absolutely fine. That's a completely valid choice to keep your writing to yourself. But if you want to share your writing with the world, you've got to handle rejection. And what I always tell people, because I've learned this the hard way, is there are so many factors, all the factors you don't control. You don't control, what a publication is or an editor is looking for or when. You don't control what you're competing against. You don't control what they think they can sell. You don't control the mix that they want in that anthology. They may want certain kinds of stories and yours doesn't just quite fit. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's so not about you and your work almost all the time. It's about a whole other mix of things that you're not even privy to. And so it's important to remember that, and you just got to keep going. You have to.
Yeah, that's not a reason not to throw it out against the wall. As a musician, like a lot of times, we aren't the best determiner of which song should be released.
Right.
So sometimes you work on a bunch of songs, and it's like the song you think should be released, and everybody around you is like, no, that's not it. It's actually this one. It's the one you don't like. So as a writer, do you run into that? Like, well, I mean, it's hard to probably because we're dealing with like individual pieces of a bigger thing. Sometimes like an album or an EP has like these components.
Yeah.
But when you're writing a certain story that maybe it's something that you really didn't like, but then somebody looks at it and said, "Well, this is it. This is what you should really work on."
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think for me, that's happened in a different way, which is to say, I'll submit, for example, a short story, and it'll be rejected by 3 places. But then the 4th place that you submitted it to, and they're like, we couldn't stop talking about this. We thought this was really good. We're going to publish this. So what's wrong with the other 3? Nothing. And what's wrong with the story? It didn't change. Nothing's wrong. It's a very, very, very subjective business.
It's very subjective.
And again, there were all these factors that, you don't control. And, people are entitled to their own taste, and they're not saying you're bad. They're just saying it's not what we want to publish. So that's how that happens.
I think that's awesome. That's life. That's the way it is. It's like a lot of times as an artist, you don't get better. Like the first time you pick up an instrument, nobody wants to hear you play.
Right.
Like everybody knows that, right? They have their kid pick up a trumpet, and they're like, well, I don't want to hear that trumpet. They're not
right. But then you turn into Wynton Marsalis, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So it's the 10,000 hours you mentioned. It's like it's the dedication and why you do it. Like some people like the kids I grew up with, they don't play anymore, because their motivation wasn't that they love the music. They maybe loved it at a certain time and then they fell out of love with it.
Mm-hmm.
But the people that I've met that are continuing to play and they play until they're not here,
Mm-hmm.
there's a love for the craft
Love
of
for the
being a
craft.
musician. Like if you're a
Mm-hmm.
love of writing,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter if this one worked or this one didn't.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna still write something tomorrow, right?
Right. Right. People who write because they feel they need to write. People who make music, they're doing it because they feel a need, a compulsion, a passion to do it. Otherwise, we could be doing something else. So that gets back to, again, what we said almost at the beginning, which is this has to come from deep inside you. This cannot be imposed from the outside. When all the kids whose mom made them take piano lessons and they struggled, they wouldn't practice, like that wasn't their calling. That wasn't in them. You can't force it.
It. Yeah, you're trying to
Yeah.
force somebody to be
Yeah.
a ballerina and then they jump out of it and say, no, I'm not
Yeah.
gonna do that. I'm gonna
Yeah.
modern dance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or they're
Yeah.
not gonna do dance at all. They're gonna do something else.
Right.
And it's like, that's people have to find their own way, find that
Yeah.
voice and
Yeah.
give themselves the permission structure. But I love the fact that you kind of like look at all aspects, very holistic
Yes.
kind of point of view of
Yes.
of coaching, which I think is fantastic. And I loved our conversation today because we like to talk about, the process of creativity and what can help creative people. And like, even if you're not a writer, there's a lot of things you said that apply to multiple types of art. And I think
Absolutely, because everybody is creative in their own way, and you just need to be in touch with that. You need to be back in touch with that, deep into your middle age, and you need to be not afraid to sort of explore that and take those risks and experiment with that creative side of yourself. It's so worth it.
well, I want to let people know we do have your website there, Amy Writes live. If people
Mhm.
click on that, what would they find there?
Well, they'll find a whole lot about me and my all my books and links to book coaching. They'll learn about Wrangling the Doubt Monster. They'll learn about my creativity workshops. There's probably more there than anybody really wants to know, but they're free. They are free to go and free to browse.
That is fully clickable on all the platforms that you can listen to or watch a podcast. We've been on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We will be on all the other platforms where you can listen to or watch a podcast by tomorrow. We'll send a landing page to everybody out there that wants to check it out again on whatever platform they want to. If they want to listen to it again on an audio-based platform, they will be out there. I want to thank you for being a guest on the Family Like the Ghost podcast, and I appreciate the time you took with us today.
Thank you. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.